So I'd like to welcome everybody to the Medical Marijuana and Wellness webinar series. Tonight's topic will be pain management in medical marijuana. And for those of you who have been following the webinar series, we had a gentleman who was going to join us from Move, was going to be one of our co-hosts. And unfortunately, he's under the weather. And this afternoon was informed he wasn't able to make it. So filling in is a very competent and a person who is going to help us, who knows a lot about pain management. I'd like to introduce you to Chris Cano. Chris is with Suncoast NORML. And he's going to help me actually go through the slides and also explain a little bit about medical cannabis and pain management. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, thank you, Marc. I appreciate the introduction. As Marc said, my name is Chris Cano. I'm the Executive Director of the Suncoast Chapter of NORML. NORML is the national organization for the reform of marijuana laws, and being around since 1970 is the oldest continuous organization in the United States fighting for the rights of responsible cannabis users. And, you know, if we could shrink our mission down into one sentence, it would be legalize it. You know, we want to make sure that everyone has safe access, affordable access to clean quality cannabis that they can utilize as medicine. And so we engage at every level of government when it comes to our advocacy efforts, whether it's fighting for decriminalization at the local level, fighting to improve our state's medical marijuana system, which we have some legislation pending that we're fighting for this session. And you should contact your state representative and state senator, ask them to support the Public Employee Medical Marijuana Protection Act, ask them to support the Medical Marijuana Patient Protection Act, among numerous other bills. And if you want to get involved, we'll tell you later about how you can get involved with Suncoast NORML. But of course, if you want to legalize it, we're the organization that you want to be working with.
Well, Chris, you not only have been pushing a lot to be able to get cannabis legalized, but also your website and the norml.com website has a lot of information about medical cannabis in general. I know that in preparing these webinars, I use your websites as a good reference source, because it's been not only is it a good reference source, but all the information has been highly vetted. So my compliments to you that's out there. What I'm going to do, if you don't mind, I'm going to share some slides, because I think that's going to help us get started this evening. Let's go over here. Great. So Chris, like I mentioned, Jeff didn't make it. Thank you very much for making it on here, but we have our medical marijuana and wellness webinar series. You can see there's a number of events that are going on this year. This is the one on pain management. And I'm not going to go through all the different events. I will mention that one of the events that is not on this calendar is March 2nd. If you go to our website, marijuanaaware.com, you'll be able to register for that. That is a webinar that's going to be live in person in the villages on March 2nd. And you can sign up and register for that. It's not going to be, we don't know if we're going to be able to webcast it or not, but definitely come join us if you're in the villages area. And we're going to be doing our first live webinar, about almost 2 years. In fact, it will be more than 2 years that we'll be able to do that. But our organization is really here to be able to help people understand medical cannabis and ask questions. And so please feel free to ask questions about any information that you see tonight. So thank you everyone for being patient enough to take a look at this. What I will point out is we're here to answer your questions, and there is no dumb question. We are here to really get the subject of medical cannabis, the subject of pain out on the table, and please feel free to ask questions. Now, what you're going to see is down here, you're going to see a little button that says Q&A, and please click on that button. Please feel free to ask your questions. There is a chat button that you'll see. Some people do ask questions in chat. I monitor, and the other speakers monitor the Q&A pretty closely. We have our moderators monitoring the chat. So you can help us quite a bit if you kind of put your question in the Q&A button that you see down there. But I want to point out that these events are going to be, that we're putting together tonight. You're going to get, after the webinar, you'll get an email that'll be a link to the recording of the webinar. We are recording it on YouTube, so you'll be able to see it again. And then also it's being streamed live right now on Facebook. So I thought I'd let you know about that. When you get that link, it'll also have a slide to the presentation deck. So you'll be able to review the slides. Any sponsor discounts, you'll be able to take a look at those, not to mention speaker information and a lot of our notes that are in the background. So sometimes when we go through this, there's a lot of information. People are trying to take notes. Please do, but you'll also be able to get this email that's going to be able to let you take a look at the different slides and see what exactly is out there. Chris, you were kind enough to cover NORML, and I have to tell you, I've been following NORML for a long time, and I just want people to know who NORML is. You're the premier organization for the decriminalization and legalization of cannabis. And you guys have done a great job for a long time. But I think the main thing is you're really a grassroots organization. Your members are. I've been to a lot of your meetings. You really have from all walks of life, from business executives, workers. It's amazing to see the breadth of people that really support medical cannabis.
Yeah, people from every walk of life, people from every demographic, all utilize medical cannabis to feel better, to live a normal life. Whether it's people suffering from chronic debilitating illnesses, pain, PTSD, emotional distress, anxiety, and cannabis helps with a variety of symptoms. Tonight, we're going to talk specifically about pain management. But if you ever want to get involved and connect with a network of fellow patients and people who are cannabis users who are in this fight with you together, definitely become a member of Suncoast NORML. You can visit suncoastnormal.org, as Marc said, to gain access to some of our resources and reference material, and also national NORML at normal.org. We have over 50 states in this country, including the different territories with various laws in regards to medical cannabis. And you may want to just check National NORML's website for cannabis laws. One of the things in particular we're fighting for here in Florida is tourist reciprocity. People come from other states as medical marijuana patients, and you either have to break the law to bring your own medicine over state lines here to Florida because you don't have access to Florida dispensaries, not being a Florida resident. So definitely, we would love for you to contact your state legislatures, state senators, and state representatives, and ask them to support our Tourist Reciprocity Act that we're currently pushing through the Florida legislature. People shouldn't come here on vacation and leave on probation as a medical marijuana patient.
That's for sure. Thank you, Chris. And please look at Suncoast NORML and normal.com. I do want to have one last housekeeping issue, and that is that this webinar series is dedicated to someone who's done a number of webinars with us. Her name is Jennifer Perdomo. Unfortunately, we lost Jennifer about a month and a half ago. She was a lady that I call her a canna warrior. She did a lot of education. She educated thousands of people over the last 5 or 6 years, giving live seminars, putting on webinars with us. She's sorely going to be missed, and we just wanted to honor her because she did a lot of hard work, and she's somebody that we really have a lot of respect for. So I just wanted to give a shout out for Jennifer and say thank you, and we're dedicating this webinar series to her. So Chris, let's dive into pain management if we can for a second. Pain is one of the most common patient complaints that we find about medical cannabis. And what's really interesting is chronic pain is often misdiagnosed and also mistreated. I know that in the case of myself, I have a case of chronic pain, and literally almost 6 years ago when I was going to the doctor, he was having a hard time. He was saying, you don't have pain, you don't have any chronic pain. And that's because chronic pain really has to do with having more than one medical condition, and he couldn't identify which condition it was. So therefore, in the doctor's mind, it didn't exist. And I kept saying, it may not exist in your world, but it's existing in mine. I think this is something that it's kind of common. You've seen that quite a bit, haven't you, Chris?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a number of members with Suncoast NORML who suffer from chronic pain, whether it's injuries that they sustained playing sports in high school or college, or injuries they received on the job, or injuries they received in defense of this country and our freedoms. And I think it's important for us to realize that pain itself is something that we struggle with as a society as we get older, and how we manage it. And it's if you look back to the opioid crisis that has happened over the last 20 years in this country, people are getting relief for the first time in their life, in a sense, without addiction, by being able to utilize medical cannabis.
A lot safer way of approaching the pain issue. I know that there's really two types of pain. There's chronic and there's acute pain. Chronic is one of those things that persists over a period of time, for example, 3 months or longer, and usually has been caused by more than one condition. I know in my particular case, I have 7 herniated discs in my neck from an auto accident. Also, I had a left knee replacement. Welcome to being over the age of being a senior citizen over the age of 65. And really, the doctors had trouble really diagnosing the pain because it was coming from 2 different spots in 2 different areas. But I definitely had pain, and my use of medical cannabis really helps me get my life back and live on a daily basis. We also have acute pain. What's acute pain? Acute pain comes from an injury or an illness. Typically, it lasts only a few months, and it typically goes away. If I had the knee replacement by itself, the acute pain would have typically subsided after about 3 to 6 months. But unfortunately, if I have more than one condition, it really is there in my body. And what's interesting is one of the top reasons for long-term disability now in the United States is chronic pain. I think you've seen that, haven't you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, whether you've been injured on the job, whether it's just years of grinding away, people suffer and get up every single day with chronic pain. I can see, my own mother, who's a nurse in her 60s, having to work 10 or 12-hour shifts at a hospital. Chronic pain is something that people struggle with, whether you have slip disc in your neck or your knees aren't what they used to be. And so, sometimes the over-the-counter relief and those NSAIDs, as you got on the slide here, Tylenol, they don't work for folks effectively. The higher up the dosage you go, the more toxic they become. So cannabis presents you with a non-toxic alternative to pain management.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I know that the reason I bring this slide up is you're not alone. If you have pain and you have chronic pain, you're not alone. I think a lot of people who have pain, they kind of suffer and they don't really say much about it. And really, you're not alone. It's interesting that when you take a look at the number of people that have either pain or chronic pain, I think I saw some number in one of the studies I was looking at recently that said 38% of the people here in the United States have some sort of pain problem, either that's chronic or acute. And I found that number to be very, very high. But I think also here with this what I call the COVID environment, we actually probably are experiencing a little bit more than normal because we're just basically now being able to pay more attention to our bodies and what we're doing. But one of the things that cannabis brings to us is the capability to be able to address pain, to address the pain management without taking the risk of opioids. And I think that's very, very important. It's important to point out, and Chris, you can chime in on this. No one has ever died of a fatal overdose from using cannabis, either recreationally or from the medically. And I think that's really important when you compare the fact that we're losing, depends on the stat that you look at, whether it's 20 or it's 40 or it's 50 people a day. I've heard as much as 100 from opioids that we're losing people on a daily basis. It's just, there's no reason to do that. You can have a safe alternative to chronic pain, to actual acute pain by using cannabis. So let's talk a little bit about medical marijuana and pain management. What are specifically some of the areas that we can take a look at and where medical marijuana can help you? Now, I'm not going to go through every one of these conditions, but you can see there's ALS, Parkinson's, muscle cramps, PTS, anxiety. Now you might say, where does anxiety come into play? Because a lot of people right now when you get in one of those modes where you're getting very anxious, it does cause pain in your body. And people have been finding out that that's one of the main reasons why people are turning to medical cannabis. Under the mask of pain, they actually see that a lot of this, if we can get rid of the anxiety, people will be able to calm down and be able to get out there and be able to feel better and get their life back and get the relief they want. It offers the patient the capability to have a therapy where you don't worry about a fatal overdose. Especially when you have exhausted almost every other pain therapy that's out there. We get in the cannabis business. A lot of times we are the last alternative for a lot of people, when in fact we should be the first alternative. That's safe to say, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, politicians in particular who I deal with have that mindset where cannabis seems to be, you need to be terminally ill to utilize it. And in many cases, we can stop cases of terminal illness if cannabis was incorporated into people's treatment plans much earlier in their diagnosis. And, whether that's in regards to cancer, chronic pain management, and you have a number of other debilitating chronic conditions that you have up there. Marc, while we're on the topic, I do want to take the time, I don't know if we want to address just a couple questions now, or is there a spot later? I do see some folks have some open questions, so I just wanted to pause for a second and see.
Let's address the question now. Pick one, Chris, and let's go for it.
Well, there's one in particular. Michael Gallagher asked, why are costs to get a card so much higher than what's stated on Florida's website? And so I just wanted to take the time to answer that. In the state of Florida, currently a medical marijuana card costs you $75, which you pay to the state, which is no different than what you would pay to get a driver's license or a fishing license or another type of license to the state of Florida. Now, the additional cost that you may be incurring is for what it costs for your doctor's recommendation. Currently, traditional insurance does not pay for medical marijuana treatment, nor the recommendations for a medical marijuana treatment plan. So you're really going to have to pay out-of-pocket cash to a doctor in the state of Florida that is recommended to certify patients for medical marijuana. And towards the end of this presentation, we're going to give you some options and some doctor clinics you can visit to get your medical marijuana card and your recommendation.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out that I know when they were creating the medical marijuana program here in Florida, Rick Scott or the people that were part of that group, they did want doctors to be able to, the good news is they wanted doctors to be able to verify that a patient did have a medical condition that qualified for medical cannabis. On the other side of the coin, what they did was they required you to go to 2 doctor's visits a year as opposed to 1. And I find that kind of interesting in that, for example, in my case where I have herniated discs in my neck, there's a perception that maybe in 6 months from now that's going to go away. I certainly wish it would, that's for sure. But I don't see the reason for the second visit. However, that's the policy here in Florida. It's the law. I think what they were trying to do is make it more expensive, and they did. And I know there's some legislation on the table. We'll mention that what you're working on, Chris, to actually get it so that we do 1 cannabis visit a year as opposed to 2, right?
Yes, we're currently working with Senator Jeff Brandes from St. Petersburg, who's a Republican senator and a leader in the Senate. He's actually going to be term limited out soon. So we're hoping that this final session, he can help us get these bills passed, which will allow for more telehealth visits rather than requiring you to come into your doctor once you've made a recommendation, and also to advance doctors' educations and provide them more education in regards to recommending medical marijuana.
Sure. So I thought that's important to point out. That's a good question, and we would like to see the cost being a lot less. I know we do still have to pay the doctor for their recommendation and putting their medical license on the line, but I think we should do it in a way that's more cost effective for the patients. And this goes back to your organization helping to drive the cost down, and hopefully we'll be able to get that passed this year and make it easier for a lot of people.
There is a new bill, House Bill 679, sponsored by Representative Leonard and Representative Roach, which is a cost-saving measure for patients. So that's a bipartisan bill that we should see some movement on. So patients should be saving up to 60% of what they're paying now when it comes to this new bill.
Yeah, and Deborah pointed out that two visits a year for $199 for seniors is tough, and we agree. Unfortunately, that's the law set up by the state, and we have to live with it. We would like to, like NORML is doing, we're trying to get that changed. But right now, that is the situation, and whatever you can do to let your state legislature, your state representatives know that you support Lerner's bill and a few others, that would really help quite a bit. So let's talk a little bit for a second about this research that's been done. Now, here in the United States, cannabis is a Schedule I drug. So there is virtually no research that's been done on cannabis other than what we call anecdotal studies, which means that they go out, like the University of California went out. They found people that had neuropathic pain. They found people that did in fact look at different strategies for how they help it. They found people that were using cannabis for it, and they reported on that. So this is what we call it. They call it a clinical trial. It was more of an anecdotal study that was out there, but they did come back and they definitely showed that you can reduce neuropathic pain by using cannabis. That's what they showed, which was very, very interesting. Now in Canada, cannabis is legal, and McGill University is one of the top medical universities, not only in Canada, but also in North America. And they also did a study that took a look at pain as it relates not only to relieving pain, but how it relates to sleep quality, anxiety. And what they found is that in many cases, it actually helped participants relieve the pain that was out there and help them get better sleep. It had them lead a better quality of life. And this is also reflected in another study that was done in 2019 that showed that 80% of the participants in that particular study. Now, this study was done in Israel. And what they found out is that 80% of the patients that used medical cannabis found that it helped them relieve their pain and basically get their life back. So there is some study that's been done here recently that shows that it does in fact work. It's not something that's in the corner or something in the background. And then I also want to point out that pain is something that's been studied in the medical cannabis world for a long time. This is some studies that are out there. I'm not going to go through each one. You'll find them in the follow-up material. but it's a lot of these studies, again, if you look at them very closely, you'll see they're all done outside the United States. And so most of them do in fact come to the same conclusion: medical cannabis can help with pain. You've seen that quite a bit, haven't you, Chris?
Well, I'm seeing some of the questions and looking at the chat here as well. And folks are really seeking answers this evening about how cannabis can help them with their particular condition. And for some folks, they've said they've tried, tinctures, they've tried oils, they've tried topicals. The truth is, and you can see here on the different studies of the articles, one in particular I want to point to is the 2015 study of the efficacy of inhaled cannabis on painful neuropathy. Some folks, and I'll go to Ellie's question, she has restless leg syndrome. And so, one of the things that can help you is especially if you're suffering from that, is to, smoke it. But for some folks, smoking doesn't necessarily work in the sense they don't want to roll up an herb, light it on fire, deal with the harsh coughing that they can get from that. So, cannabis concentrates, especially here in Florida, now that we have access to them in our dispensaries, in our medical marijuana treatment centers, really can help get you an immediate release, an immediate relief of pain that you might be having, and also help you before you go to bed at night if it's keeping you up. And so I would highly recommend, there's a number of different ways you can do that, but the popular colloquial form is dabs, which is just taking a small bit of concentrated cannabis oil, whether it be RSO or some type of rosin or some type of wax, and heating that up and smoking that. And you can use that through a vape pen. You can get you a rig, a wireless e-nail. There's a lot of different ways that you can do that, but utilizing inhaled cannabis concentrates is probably the best relief that you can get right now for your restless leg syndrome and for those folks who have trouble sleeping at night due to chronic pain.
Yeah, and we're going to cover routes of administration, but I think it's also important to point out a lot of people, they talk about smoking medical cannabis or smoking for medical cannabis. There's a little known fact, not a well-known fact, that the minute you light up, that joint, you're losing 50% of the cannabinoids in that plant, and also most of the terpenes and flavonoids. That's why it's recommended that, as opposed to smoking, use a vape pen. Not only is it easier on your lungs and easier on your body, but also you're not losing the terpenes and the flavonoids with a vape pen than you are with smoking. So and also when you go to like the tincture oils, like RSO oils, that's a whole plant product, which means you're getting the full benefit of the product of cannabis without necessarily losing a lot of the efficacy of the product as you're using it. And we'll get into routes of administration in a minute. Chris, I'd like to go to the next slide if you don't mind. This is a video that was done by Sanjay Gupta, and I thought it's appropriate for our subject matter tonight. So I'm going to play this video if you don't mind. It's a couple minutes long, but I think it really helps highlight what we're trying to talk about tonight. Let's get this moving.
THC, which is the psychedelic component of cannabis, which makes you feel high. And then there is CBD, cannabidiol, the non-psychoactive chemical. We've told you about this one for years, especially how it stops chronic epileptic seizures in young children. There is also research showing that CBD is particularly helpful when it comes to pain. In fact, CBD can do something opioids cannot.
With opiates, you're talking about killing the pain, masking the pain, you're done.
Dr. Julie Holland edited the Pot Book, a complete guide to cannabis.
With medical cannabis, you're actually not just talking about decreasing pain, but you're decreasing inflammation.
That's because opioids do a good job of interfering with pain signals going to the brain. But cannabis works on two receptors, one that blocks that pain and one that decreases inflammation. It's ironic that cannabis can do more than opioids, yet prescription opioids are legal and cannabis is not. Historically, that was not the case. For centuries, both cannabis and poppy, two plants, the natural forms of marijuana and opioids, were commonly prescribed by doctors and dispensed at pharmacies. But that all changed in the 1930s. Opioids would go on to become a best-selling drug, and cannabis became increasingly fringe, in part because one kind of cannabis, called hemp, was a threat to big business. Hemp is a cheap fiber, good for making paper and canvas. It's more absorbent than cotton and could be used as a potential fuel.
So there were a lot of vested interests that sort of put cannabis down, took it away from the doctors, made it illegal.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting, Chris. It goes back to the points that you're making right now. Literally for thousands of years, cannabis and hemp was one of the leading medical properties out there. And in fact, when it was made illegal, the politicians in Washington, D.C. did not know that what they called marijuana, which they were using for political reasons to make it illegal, was cannabis. And the AMA came back and took a position that they shouldn't do that. However, rather than listening to science, they listened to politics, and we got to where we are right now. And I think that's something important to point out.
Well, yeah, Marc,
THC.
I
Go ahead,
think it's definitely important to talk about the history of this so folks can understand when they're having access issues. It really does go back to politics in the history of cannabis. One of the things that I just saw in the chat I wanted to address, Mary Rice asked, will you lose THC vaping flower? Okay, so I just want to clarify that question real quick for folks. If you want to vape flower, that's all well and good. You know, you can utilize a vaporizer. You can, light it on fire itself and combust it and smoke it. Some of the vapes that vape flower, I've never had much success in utilizing because most of them just don't get hot enough.
Right.
But what is important is that whether you're smoking concentrates or flower, is understanding at which temperature does a certain cannabinoid combust. Because if you vape or you have your concentrates on your e-nail set for too high of a temperature, you can get some immediate relief, but you're going to lose a lot of other cannabinoids, flavonoids, essential oils in the plant that have healing and medicinal properties. You're going to get high real quick, but it is not going to give you the full medicinal effect. So low temp use of concentrates is the best way. And Marc, I believe you actually have some slides and charts that we'll see later in the presentation that'll give folks a little bit more insight to that.
Yeah, we'll give some more insight to it. And also I will make sure, and so for the moderators, I will send you an article that came out literally today on what temperature you should be vaping, setting your vape pen to when you vape. And I think this is very, very helpful. At least it was helpful to me to know what's the right approach to take that's out there. I didn't have time to put it in the deck that's there, but that's an excellent question that's there. But really what we're talking about when we're talking about cannabis are various cannabinoids that we have in our body, that we have in the product itself. Our body wants to be in a state called balance. It's a balanced state. They call it homeostasis. And what they found out is that the endocannabinoid system in your body is really part of your nervous system that you have. And it's the way your body regulates itself and keeps itself in homeostasis. Now, the fascinating part about cannabis is it is a real conundrum for Western medicine. And a lot of people say, well, how come doctors don't understand it? And how come the FDA and those people don't pick it up? Primarily because when we got into this whole mode of FDA approved drugs, we decided we're going to have one product, only one product, so only one cannabinoid, only one way of taking it, like a pill, for one condition that's out there. And what's interesting about cannabis is that it works 1 and 1 is 3. The THC and the CBD work together. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But because there's a number of different components involved in it, and then also because there's over 12 different ways of being able to take it, the studies that we would have to do would be just absolutely ridiculous to prove that it works, when in fact we know that literally for 5,000 years it was working. And prior to it becoming illegal, it was the #1 prescribed medication for patients by the AMA and part of the pharmacology of the AMA of this particular country. So there's anecdotal evidence for years of how well it worked. It was never even questioned. And then when we get back to this, why does this one little cannabinoid inside of cannabis work? There are studies being done on that, but also we really understand, and we're going to talk a little bit about how 1 and 1 is 3. So what's interesting when we look at the cannabinoids is, what does it affect? How does it affect our body? What do they do? And what's interesting is they have, and there's a whole bunch of things here. I'm not going to go through each one of them. This will be part of the deck that we follow up. But there's a number of different situations where cannabis provides relief for a lot of patient situations that are out there. And Chris, you've seen a lot of this, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I have a neighbor who recently passed away after a long battle with HIV and AIDS, but to see it help stem off the AIDS dementia, to see it help with a number of other mental conditions that come with the late stages of AIDS, it's a help. My own father suffered from a terminal form of dementia that he was diagnosed with at 53, and the doctors only gave him 6 months to live. Well, it was through the care of my mother, through our family network, but also being able to utilize medical cannabis when we could get a hold of it. And one of the stories that stuck out to me in particular that I wanted to share tonight was my father had lost the ability to talk after several strokes and the dementia had set in. And his first dose of RSO, of pure, organic cannabis oil, he actually started speaking for the first time in 2 years. I mean, it wasn't a coherent sentence, but he was making words. So there were parts of the brain that were being activated that hadn't been utilized in so long. And so just understanding a little bit that whether you're having, pain from different conditions, or you're having, mental issues, or, you're suffering from epilepsy, cannabis is the medicine that you're going to want to utilize, because as you touched on it before, Marc, not only does it regulate the immune system, our appetite and sleeping, but also it has anti-cancer effects, which you can see on this slide. Now, some people in the chat and others have mentioned about, well, I've utilized CBD, but I also don't want to be high. And this is something that I have to stress to you, is that do not allow how our modern medicine system has allowed us to want to pick and cherry pick how we treat ourselves. And I'm going to pause for a second to cough. Excuse me.
Go ahead. Now, I do want to point out that when you talk about endocannabinoids, there are over 200 cannabinoids inside of cannabis. And that's what makes it so complex, is because it has a tremendous amount of medical benefits. If with 200 plus cannabinoids, plus over 200 plus terpenes, there are over 450 different medical purposes that cannabis can be used for. And that's what makes it so interesting. They call it a complex plant. It does a lot. And trying to break those down sometimes gets to be very interesting, especially for a lot of the scientists. But let's talk about, when we talk about the relief that you're going to get, how does it work? Because a lot of questions on how does it work, it's not working for me, and how does it work, is because your body produces what they call endocannabinoids. This is something that your body produces. This is how your body manages itself. The endocannabinoids are part of your endocannabinoid system. And so your body is producing that. In essence, you are a cannabis plant. That's the best way of putting it. What are phytocannabinoids? Phytocannabinoids are the end of cannabis that is produced by the cannabis plant. And what's fascinating is the structure of the phytocannabinoids match almost exactly the endocannabinoids that you find inside your body. And that's what makes it so interesting, is because what the phytocannabinoids do is they help to support your body's endocannabinoid system. I'll use myself as an example. Being a senior citizen, I'm not producing as many endocannabinoids now as I did before. And so now, by being able to put photocannabinoids into place, in essence, I'm charging the batteries. I'm providing the raw material that my body needs to be able to put itself back in homeostasis. And that's why you find a lot of people being able to use cannabis to be able to address their particular medical condition that's out there. So it's interesting how all this works. It's a lock and key kind of a system. And we're going to talk about a little bit about that. But before I jump into that, for those of you that are new to cannabis, the cannabinoids are found in the trichomes of the plant. That's what you find over here. And so you're seeing that a lot of people perceive that there's a lot of the plant. The most important part of it are the trichomes in here, which is where you get a lot of the cannabinoids. They're like hair-like little structures that's looked at in the plant. And that's why you see all these little funny looking little pictures of cannabis, but what they're really showing you is the part of the plant that really helps provide the relief that you're really looking for.
And Marc, I wanted to take a second to pause on that. Here in Florida, we have access to get flowers, at the dispensaries, to get the concentrates. But there are other cannabinoids in the plant that have healing properties that exist outside of the flower. And that's why we're fighting for the right to grow it at home here in Florida, for our patients, because there are some patients in particular that need access to some of the other cannabinoids in the plant that don't necessarily exist in the flowers. They exist in the stems, they exist in the leaves, they exist in the roots. And we've actually, have a member that beat stage 4 cancer by juicing the raw plant itself, the roots, the leaves, everything into a smoothie every day. And so not just smoking the flower or turning the concentrates and the trichomes that exist in the flower into medicine.
I'm glad you brought that up, because really one of the best things when you're using smoothies is to use the cannabis leaves and part of the stalk and roots. It's actually better than the extra trichomes itself in being able to provide the medical relief that you're looking for.
Well, Mark, one of the hot topics recently that came out just this week is that cannabidiolic acid, CBGA, and cannabidiolic acid, CBDA, are actually able to prevent COVID from attaching to our cells and prevent COVID infections. But those are cannabinoids that don't necessarily exist in the flowers. You're going to find them in other parts of the plant. And with us not having the right to grow it at home, it's almost impossible for patients here to get access to those other acids and cannabinoids that exist.
And that's an excellent, those studies actually came out late last week, which is interesting. And they were done by the University of Oregon. And they were also done again, they had some studies that were done out of Israel. And there were two different studies that actually coincided and actually came to the same result almost at the same time about how it can be helpful to be able to help you prevent yourself from getting COVID. It's not going to cure yourself of COVID. What it does, it acts as a component that helps you being able to, first of all, not get it. And if you do get it, not get it as severely. And that's what those studies were showing. And we'll provide those as part of the follow-up information when we send those out. That's a good point, Chris. Let's talk for a minute about THC, because when people talk about helping with pain, one of the things that comes up is you need to have THC. Now, there's a term that I'm going to bring up. It's called agonist. And what is an agonist? An agonist is something that actually activates the CB1 and the CB2 receptors in your body. That's how this whole system works. Now, what's interesting is that THC is an agonist. In other words, it does have psychotropic effects. It will have psychoactive effects, but this is the part of cannabis that blocks the pain signals in your brain. You saw that in the Sanjay Gupta video that we had. It was blocking the pain signals. This is the process of THC, and that's why when people are looking at addressing pain, if you have pain that comes from inflammation, for example, in my left knee where I had knee surgery, I get inflammation. That inflammation causes pain. By using CBD, which is great for inflammation, it does reduce the pain because it's getting rid of the inflammation. But as far as getting rid of the pain, actual pain itself, the raw pain itself, like with my neck, in the case of the herniated discs, I need to have something with THC to actually block that pain and make it so that I can conduct myself on a daily basis. And I want to point out some of the medical benefits that people have seen from THC itself. So,
well, Mark, I've seen it myself in my own life. You know, you got a couple of slides here that points that resonate with obesity and diabetes, right? I'm a bigger guy, got a big belly. You know, I'm pre-diabetic myself. And one of the issues that I struggle with on a daily basis is frequent urination throughout the night, which prevents me from getting a solid 8 hours of sleep or 6 hours of sleep and being able to, you know, rest well, let my body shut down. And so having to get up every 90 minutes to use the bathroom is a nightmare. But utilizing, you know, a strong indica with a high percentage of THC allows me to go to sleep throughout the night, get at least 4 to 6 hours of sleep without having to get up to go to the bathroom. And so for those of you who might have some of those same issues, I'd highly recommend using a high THC concentrated flower before bed.
You're preaching to the choir, Chris. Thank you very much. The answer is yes. So let's talk a little bit. Let's go one more slide into this. And really, when you talk about how endocannabinoids work inside your body, THC addresses the CB1 and CB2 receptors. And CB1 and CB2 receptors, we're going to talk about those in just a minute, are throughout your whole body. CB1 receptors primarily in the brain and central nervous system. CB2 receptors are primarily in your gut and go throughout your body. But THC addresses both of those. But CBD is an interesting product, and it not only does it address the CB1 and CB2 receptors, it also addresses other receptors in your body. Now, I did a webinar last weekend or last Wednesday on cannabinoids, and we went through each one of these different receptors and how they work. But I think it's important to point out that's why CBD has such tremendous value. Is it's not just helping you with your endocannabinoid system; it's helping your whole body stay in homeostasis, and that's what makes CBD such an interesting product. And CBD also is something interesting. It acts as what they call an inverse agonist or an antagonist for THC. So what happens is if you use CBD with THC, what it does is it blocks and actually reduces the psychotropic or the high effect that you get from THC. So when you have THC and CBD working together, this is where one-on-one, you get the medical benefits without getting as high, where if you use just THC by itself, like when you use products like Marinol, you get very high, but you don't necessarily get all the other benefits from CBD that you find with the other receptors in your body.
And Mark, I'm glad you mentioned that because for a lot of folks trying to understand what's out there on the market, what products are available to them, it's really more about dosing ratios with the
Right.
various cannabinoids.
Right.
You know, because of prohibition in the recreational market, there's this big push where a lot of plants have a very high amount of THC and hardly any CBD at all. And really, to be effective medically, a 1-to-1, 1-to-2, or even 1-to-3 ratio makes sense for that. And rather than what you're seeing where a plant might have 27% THC and less than 1% CBD. And while that may make you feel good, it's not providing the medical benefits that a lot of these folks need.
Right. And I know that I work with a number of patients with MMTC, medical marijuana treatment clinics of Florida. And one of the things that we recommend is that when you start your medical cannabis regime and you start to look at what works, you should have some CBD available. So that if you're starting to get the dosing, and we'll talk about dosing in a little bit, but as you're going through the dosing, if you start feeling a little bit high, you can take some CBD. And what that does is it brings it down from that high. And that's why we recommend everybody at least have some CBD available to them when you're going through the idea of being able to find your sweet spot. Very important piece. But CBD has a tremendous number of benefits. And again, in my particular case, by reducing the inflammation, it reduces the pain. And that's a big deal for me. Now, let's talk a little bit about the endocannabinoid. We've been kind of dancing around this, but the endocannabinoid system is comprised of not only it's part of your nervous system, it's CB1 and CB2 receptors. And this is how your body regulates itself and puts itself into what they call homeostasis. What's really, really interesting is this was really discovered in the 1940s, but really it wasn't brought out into the forefront until almost the 90s, the 80s and the 90s, when Dr. Raphael Mechoulam was looking at CB1 and CB2 receptors and THC and CBD and found out that they fit like a lock and key in with the human receptors. And that's what gave us the medical benefits that you see by using cannabis. What does that mean by medical benefits? We're talking about helping you with sleep, talking about affecting you with pain, sleep, memory, appetite, anti-inflammatory effects, and other parts of the immune system. And you can see that this is the areas over here where the CB1 and the CB2 receptors are distributed throughout your body. Chris, comment?
Yeah, a lot of the deficiencies, if you will, that we have occurring in our own endocannabinoid system is because of the diet that we have here in America. We have a lot of processed foods. And also one of the things that is different 100 years in our food supply than in the modern era is that hemp itself was a part of the livestock feed 100 years ago,
yeah,
you know, for cows and pigs, chickens and such. And it's just starting to come back. And only certain suppliers may be feeding hemp to their various, animals. But a lot of, we have food that is really vitamin deficient in many ways. And, if that's the best way for a lay person to really understand what cannabis is and what phytocannabinoids are, is they're more like vitamins, if you will, for a lay person to help understand all this science, is that your body naturally produces chemicals that are essentially fatty acids that are neurotransmitters that regulate different parts of the nervous system. And as you said, those things that affect sleep, memory, appetite, and where you have inflammation. And the fact is that the phytocannabinoids found in the cannabis plant can mimic and replace the deficiencies that where our bodies are not naturally producing.
Right. Now, what's interesting is, and this is a little bit of a chart. Now, this is a bit of a busy slide, but what's interesting is when we talked about the lock and key, you can see where you have the CB1 receptors primarily in the brain and the central nervous system, CB2 receptors distributed primarily in the gut and throughout your whole body. But what's interesting is that lock and key system, and there's a couple of things I'll talk about in just a moment. I have a slide on this. It's what I call the dynamic duo of cannabis. It's AEA and 2AG. These are little components that work with your body and help the endocannabinoids fit into the CB1 and CB2 receptors and make it so that this works really well. And the reason I call them the first responders of cannabis is because if you take a look at the way they work over here, first responders run to the problem. And that's pretty much what 2AG and AEA do. When they see a problem, they run to the problem. They let your body know, your nervous system know there's a problem. Your body then produces the endocannabinoids. It gets sent to your bloodstream and sent to that part of your body to be able to help that. And that's where they come into place over here. Like, for example, with 2AG, working with the CB2 receptors to be able to help address pain. Also, if you take a look at in the CB1 receptors over here, this is where they come in and use, with, again, using THC as an example, This is where they actually stop the pain signals from going into the brain. So they're very, very, very important part of it. There's not a lot of talk about 2-AG and AEA. It is a technical term. It's interesting that AEA is considered to be an endocannabinoid, but it's not really something that they isolate and look at. It's more of a agonist. It's something that helps the process work within your body, and that's how the whole thing works. And I have the slide right here. I know that a lot of people are saying, "Well, what are you talking about, Mark?" Well, AEA is basically your body's own version of THC. Best way of putting it. It plays a major role in how your body feels. That's why they call it the bliss module, because it basically helps you get back to homeostasis, helps you feel better. That's really out there. And so it's interesting how it plays an important role, not only in the physical, but also in the physiological aspect of being able to process cannabis. This helps you with appetite, helps you with pain. And also they've had studies come out that shows it helps with fertility. 2-AG is really interesting because it works with both of the receptors as well, but also what it's done, it primarily works with the CB2 receptors. What is it important for? This is the receptor that helps you regulate your appetite, your pain management, and your immune system. And this is they work also with something called the fatty acids. And I'm not going to get too technical here. The DGLA, and EPA, these are fatty acids in your body. What's interesting is cannabis is actually stored in those fatty acids. And then they're actually brought out when your body needs them, it actually takes them out of the fatty acids, produces them into endocannabinoids, and sends them to your system. So I know this is a bit technical, but a lot of people want to know how cannabis works. There you go. That's how it's at it with a quick, and I have a slide on this to show you exactly how that works in just a minute. So let's talk about another part of cannabis that's really interesting, and this is called the entourage effect. And what's the entourage effect? The entourage effect is when two different cannabinoids work together, not only cannabinoids, but also the flavonoids and the terpenes, and they work together to enhance the actual medical benefits of cannabis itself. And we talked about CBD being used to monitor the psychotropic effect. That's part of the entourage effect. But also they found out that terpenes come into play. They're very, very important because they help you with the medical benefits. It also enhances what they call the CBN effect. When you want to be able to get sleep, they found there's a CBN receptor that addresses that. But it also, by using THC and CBD with CBN, it actually helps quite a bit to be able to provide your body to go back into homeostasis, to cause your body to relax, get your body have less pain, and be able to move forward. So again, this is something that where the Western medicine has trouble understanding how the components work together, and that if you use CBD and THC, it produces a very different effect than CHC by itself or CBD by itself.
Well,
Marc,
Marc,
you got some comments on this?
Yeah, one of the things is Western medicine and science understands perfectly. It's not an actual issue. The issue is that big pharmaceutical companies want to take cannabinoids and put them in a pill, and that it takes away from this entourage effect itself. Even some of our MMTC sell distillates, which may just be pure THC or pure CBD. Many of the CBD distillates you're going to find in your health food aisle of your local grocery store or Walmart are lacking this entourage effect. Understanding that the plant-based or organic, extractions are what you want. You want to see that your cannabinoids, your THC and your CBD are interacting with the essential oils in the plant. And the essential oils found in cannabis, or the terpenes, if you will, that you have there. For folks who want to know what a terpene is, it's the essential oil in the plant, no different than there are oils that exist in citrus that also exist in cannabis. There are oils that exist in cannabis that also exist in other plants like lavender or even black pepper. So some of the medical benefits that you see with folks who use peppermint oil, lavender oil, you also see with cannabis, but those effects are enhanced to heal the body much better when they're utilized with the cannabinoids and flavonoids. And that's what we talked about earlier about how you're combusting or utilizing your cannabis, because if you smoke it at too high of a temperature, you're going to burn off these terpenes and these flavonoids, and you're not going to get that entourage effect. So that's why for many folks, smoking is not the ideal way. It's good for quick pain relief, but for long-term relief, really utilizing plant-based oils like RSO and other concentrates are a better way for long-term pain management.
Absolutely. And I know there was one question about, I think Roseanne brought up a question about RSO, and we're going to address that about it. Makes her dizzy and wobbly. And she says that there's not helping for pain from neuropathy. I think that has to do also with how she's dosing and the dosing concentrations that are out there. And so I wouldn't necessarily give up on RSO. We'll talk about dosing later on, and this might be something that can help you out quite a bit. I know that in the case of my wife, when she started getting into medical cannabis, we started her going low and going slow. She wasn't getting a lot of relief. And what we found out was by increasing her dosage and by changing the combination of CBD to THC, she's actually been able to dial in and find her sweet spot. And that's what really the whole dosing thing is all about. We'll talk about this in a little bit. I don't want to jump down that rabbit hole right now. We have a rabbit hole coming up on that. But what I would like to do is really have people understand that is something that's really, really effective. Now, Chris, I'm going to change horses for a second. When I got involved in cannabis, when I was growing up as a kid, all I heard about was indica and sativa. Sativa is energetic. Indica relaxes you in the couch. And there's still a lot of that characteristic in cannabis today. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, much of the cannabis that you're going to find today are actually hybrids of these two because of the recreational market, the black market, and really much of the medical marijuana market that we have today is based off of the suppliers and those growers from that legacy market. So understanding that some of these distinctions, don't necessarily apply. The line is blurred in many ways, but it does hold that sativas tend to give you more of a neurological or cerebral type of relief. They help with anxiety very much, where the indicas do help more with pain management and sleep because of the way that the side effects come. Some folks were talking earlier about how you can utilize cannabis with other parts like diet, exercise, behaviors, and weightlifters in particular have professional wrestlers and folks who hit the gym really hard have found that the sativas help them because it energizes them, it gives them an uplifting feeling, and it also helps with the recovery time versus an indica, which makes folks feel, like you said before, stuck in the couch, a little bit lazier. At the most you might have the munchies and you don't want to get up and do anything. So trying to find the right strain that works for you is the best way to go about it.
That's really, really the key. And there's another article that came out again in the last month about how the runner's high was thought to be coming from endorphins. And what they found out, that's not the case. Endorphins don't get into your bloodstream, so they can't be giving you that high. What your runner's high is coming from is your endocannabinoid system that you have inside your body. And that's what they've been able to find out. Hence why the Olympics are coming up, and people don't realize that the Olympic Committee allows CBD to be used by the Olympic athletes. It's not a drug enhancing drug. In fact, the reason they do it is because if you've got, I'll take Summer Olympics where you got somebody running 10,000 meters today, and then 2 days from now running another 10,000 meters, the objective is to try to get the inflammation down to be able to help them out that's out there. And this has been in place for about 4 years. There's only one team that is not allowed to use CBD in the Olympic Village, and that's the U.S. team. And although we win a lot of medals and we look good, we've had the worst performance compared to the other countries the last 4 years because of the fact our athletes aren't as prepared as they could be going forward. And I think we need to really address that particular issue. But that's a whole rabbit hole in itself we get into.
Well, Mark, if you want to take a minute to just point out a fun fact, the fastest man on earth or on land, Usain Bolt, and the fastest man in water, Michael Phelps, are both the most distinguished Olympians in history and both regular cannabis users. Yeah, so the old just say no campaigns about being an unproductive pothead just don't apply in the modern era.
Yeah, it's something that works with your body, not against you. Now, I do want to point out that there are differences in the actual plants themselves, the way they physically look. But I also want to point out here, if you take a look at the indicas and sativas, what we found out over the last 10 years especially is that we've opened up to a lot of what they call cannabinoids. There wasn't a discussion about CBG and CBL and CBC and those types of cannabinoids 10 years ago. There's a lot of discussion on it right now. And we found out that each of these has medical properties that's really helping us quite a bit. And then we've also discovered there's this thing called terpenes. And terpenes, what are terpenes? Terpenes are the essential oils or the coating that's on cannabis. Why is it there? Because terpenes protect the plant from, they make it so other plants, so animals don't want to eat it. They make it so it protects it against nature, against water and storm conditions. It's the way that the natural protectant that the plant has. And what they found out is when they put that with the cannabinoids, it has tremendous medical benefits. And there's over 250 different terpenes that they found in cannabis today. Now, not all of them have been studied, just like we have over 200 cannabinoids that we found, and not all of them have been studied, but we know that they're there. We know that they have some medical benefits, and we know that they're helping us quite a bit. And what's interesting today is where we talked about indica and sativa. I think you were bringing up that point earlier, Chris, where people said, should I look for indica and sativa? They're more like indica or sativa leaning, meaning do they give you energy or relax you? What we're really heading to is something called chemotypes, which to the public, we call them cultivars. And you're seeing different people talk about what cultivars. What is a cultivar? A cultivar is a strain of cannabis that is being grown for a particular reason. It's almost like it has a chemical fingerprint. And what those fingerprints do is we know that we have strains that are very good, for example, for anxiety, AC/DC. Take that as an example. And we're going to talk about some strains later on that are very, very good for pain. We'll be very specific about which cultivars fit in that particular area. But what's interesting with these dispensaries, what we're going to today, is we're actually developing cannabis plants and developing cannabis products that address very specific situations like pain management. And I think that's very promising is what we see out there. Move is the group that's sponsoring the group tonight. Jeff couldn't make it, but this is what you see in a lot of the Move flower that's out there. A lot of the strains that we talk, a lot of cultivars we find, you can actually walk into a dispensary and say, I'm looking for this particular type of cultivar for this particular situation, and they'll help you quite a bit.
Mark, I just wanted to drop in the chat here. One cultivar in particular that a lot of patients have found a good use with is the Harlequin, which is a sativa-based, marijuana cultivar. But the reason it's so popular for pain management is because of its high expression of CBD in reference to the THC. I mean, it's a mix of Colombian gold and Thai and Swiss land. Different land races have been put together to make this one, but it has high THC, high CBD, and almost a 1-to-1 ratio that give a lot of folks who've mentioned in the chat who use CBD and don't want that THC high to affect them as much. And so I just, next time you're in, ask your local MMTC if they're growing Harlequin or if that's a strain that they're carrying.
Right. And this goes back to, I think, what Roseanne was bringing about, that she's trying a very high CBD based product. It may or not be helping her because she may need to have to increase the amount of CBD that she's taken to address the inflammation, because the pain may be coming from the inflammation and not necessarily from, is being caused by the actual condition itself. Arthritis is a prime example of that. The herniated discs in my back are an example of that, where if I can reduce the inflammation, it reduces the pain. More CBD doesn't necessarily answer that question. I mean, excuse me, more THC doesn't necessarily get rid of the pain. More CBD does. And that's it's almost counterintuitive, but that's the way this whole balance thing works. And that goes back to what you call dosing. How do you find your sweet spot? I know there's a lot of questions on this, and we're going to dive into this a little bit and get more into it as we go into the presentation. But how do you know that you found your sweet spot? How do you know what works for you? And I think it's important to point out, every person has their own personal biology is different. And so when you say, what do I take? Give me a ratio. Cannabis is not a take 2 pills and call me in the morning type of solution. In fact, they're finding out a lot of pharma drugs really aren't that way either. But cannabis especially, it has to do with how your body metabolizes them, which your body accepts. I draw an analogy to alcohol. There are some people that when they look at alcohol and trying to figure out what your tolerance is to alcohol, some people have one drink and they're done for the night. I have a friend of mine that if he has more than one drink, he's done. Dear friend of mine, love him to death, but we really got to watch how much he drinks. I have another friend of mine who can drink the whole damn bottle, but he has, and he's just getting started. And this has to do with your metabolism. Some people like light colored drinks, they like the gins and vodkas. Some people like the darker stuff, the rums, the bourbons and scotches. Some people like an umbrella in it, And so really, it really comes down to what works for you, what your body is looking to accept, and then also the consumption method that you want to use to be able to do that. Are you going to take it in a capsule form? Are you going to take it in a form of a vape pen? Are you going to take it in a topical, for example? There's a number of different ways of going. We're going to talk about each of those as we go along in the next couple of slides that are out there. But really, finding your sweet spot is the key. And let me tell you, when you find your sweet spot, and that's what's key when you're doing the dosing. When you find your sweet spot, it's like the world really opens up to you. We did seminars for almost 3 years in person seminars. And what was interesting was constantly people came to me and said, thank you for the last seminar that you gave. I got my life back. And I heard that time after time after time. And so, by the way, I'll throw a little plug in. If you go to IGMLB, igotmylifeback.com, you can actually have testimonials. Give us your testimonial on cannabis and how it works. That could help quite a bit. Please do that. We're looking at other patients are looking at how cannabis works and if it works at all. But really, we're going to talk a bit about dosing, but don't be frustrated if the first time you try it, it doesn't work. This is where we're going to get in, find your sweet spot. And I wish when I was learning how to drink that I'd have gone low and gone slow. Let me put it to you that way. That would have been sage advice. It saved me a lot of, let's just say, pain and heartache. Let's put it that way. Chris, let's talk about a little bit about how cannabis works. This is where you have endocannabinoids, where your brain is actually producing these endocannabinoids because your nervous system says, hey, there's a problem here. So it triggers the fatty acids to produce your endocannabinoids. But if you don't have enough of them, this is where photocannabinoids come into play. And this is where you get them from the plant. This is where you call THC, CBD, CBNs, that type of thing. And they work together to go in and to help your body regulate itself. This is where you have pain, appetite, sleep, pleasure, immune system, mood, memory, they work together all for that. And they're working in combination with each other, which I find very, very, very interesting. Now, you also hear about synthetic cannabinoids. What are they? You probably hear about Marinol, K2, Spice. These are THC only products. Are they effective? Well, the answer is yes. Marinol was made to help people that had AIDS or had cancer and be able to help them get their appetite back and that type of thing. But because it doesn't have any CBD, you have to be very, very careful, because not only can you get high very, very quickly, it may not be giving you the medicinal value that you need, especially if some of your condition is related to inflammation, because it doesn't have anything that helps you with the inflammation that's out there. So I don't recommend any synthetic cannabinoids at all, unless you're under strict doctor's care. That's really, really key. That's really out there.
Marc, I do want to comment on that. Synthetic cannabinoids themselves were developed because of cannabis's Schedule I status as a federal illegal drug on the Controlled Substances Act, which prevented research on Schedule I drugs. So scientists, in particular at the University of Auburn, developed what they call JWH 108 or 106, and that was the original synthetic version of THC that was initially found in K2 and some of the Spice and some of those things that you saw being sold in the gas stations, 5 and 10 years ago. And you see people today still smoking those things. Understand that they don't have any synthetic cannabinoids in them anymore. They're basically potpourri with chemicals sprayed on them from bad actors in the illicit drug market in South Florida. So definitely stay away from synthetic cannabinoids. They were never meant for human consumption, but to be used on lab rats as for research purposes.
And in very extreme cases, like I mentioned, in cases where you had terminal cancer and for AIDS, but under a doctor's care only. And so be very, very careful. We're going to talk about endocannabinoids and photocannabinoids, but I brought up the synthetics because people should know they're out there. Be very careful.
Also, Marc, I'm seeing in the chat, some folks are talking about, access without a medical marijuana card to THC products. Were we going to talk about Delta 8 and Delta 10 in later slides?
Yeah, we have Delta 8 slides.
Great. So we'll address those in a moment.
Yeah, I'll address those in just a minute. It's out there. So the answer is can't have a pain management webinar without it. So, but let's talk about how cannabis works. So what you have right now is you have your body producing endocannabinoids and photocannabinoids. What's interesting is what people perceive is people have a thought that these go directly into your CB1 and CB2 receptors, and they do not. They go into the fatty acids. So your body, the neurons of your body say there's a problem. My knee's bothering me. Your body then triggers it to break those fatty acids down into long chain fatty acids, and that's where they get distributed throughout your bloodstream into that particular part of your body that helps you quite a bit. Now, this explains really two things. Number one, why no one's ever died from using cannabis, because it's your own body using its own natural mechanism to be able to support and heal itself. There is no CB1 and CB2 receptors in the brainstem, meaning that what happens is that as you're using this, it's not going to stop you from breathing, which is what opioids do. It's not going to cause you to have a lot of the breathing and the other issues that are out there. In fact, if anything, it helps to enhance it. It helps you enhance your body, put you back in homeostasis that's out there. The other thing that happens is Now, I use my mother as an example. My mother, we put her on a regime of RSO because she was diagnosed with breast cancer about 4.5 years ago. She was 88 years old, and she called me up and said, Mark, they want to operate. And I said, Mom, you're not going to get an operation, not at 88 years old. If the chemo and radiation don't kill you, the operation will. So we put her on RSO oil. And here it is 4.5 years later, she's still around. In fact, she's like the Energizer Bunny right now as far as being able to run around. But what's interesting is when she not only it addressed her cancer, but the other thing it did is she found out that when she went to the doctor, her glaucoma was gone. She found out that the pain she had in her shoulder was gone, and she's finding that she's now able to sleep through the night. So this is where your body doesn't need a doctor to tell you that you have a problem. This is where your neurons come into place and say, produce some endocannabinoids to address that particular situation. Comments, Chris?
No, Mark, let's go ahead and go to the next slide.
Good. So the other thing that's a mixture here is terpenes. I know that there's one of the things I find is that going back to the sativa indica thing, there's one thing where there's a high doses of THC that I've seen out there that should be able to get you high and get you energized. But in fact, when you use a lot of myrcene, for example, it helps you sleep. In fact, there's a product that's out on the market called Dream that does exactly that. It's a high myrcene THC product with a lot of CBD in it as well that helps you with sleep that's out there. Chris, you want to talk about a few of the terpenes and what they do?
Sure. So, you're seeing some pictures along here to help you realize that these essential oils do not just exist in the cannabis plant, but in other plants in nature. For example, limonene, which you can find in citrus fruits, and which Mark was just talking about, myrcene, which you find in mangoes. But there's also, strong anti-anxiety benefits that you see in caryophyllene, which you can also find in black pepper, cinnamon, and other spices. And then, of course, pinene, which is something that you're going to find in the pine trees and such, but can definitely help with folks who have issues with asthma because it's a bronchodilator and can help open up airways. So some folks might ask, well, smoking cannabis seems counterproductive when you have asthma, but if you have the right balance of terpenes, you can get certain medicinal benefits from it.
That's an excellent point, Chris, because we've used bronchial inhalers for years outside of cannabis. The medical field has done that, and for people that have breathing problems, and what we found is that the products that are high, for example, in things like pinene, do in fact help you breathe better. It's like a bronchial inhaler. It helps you be able to open up your lungs because it does go into the lungs and helps the lungs be able to get back into their homeostasis state that's out there. So again, a lot of these norms that are out there, you have to be careful with. That's why consulting a medical cannabis doctor or a medical cannabis practitioner, they can help you understand a lot of this and help you get your dosing right. What's out there.
And again, also, we were talking about what's the proper temperature. These different terpenes combust at different temperatures. So making sure you're using the right reference material to help you know what temperature you should be combusting or vaporizing your various cannabis products at.
Right. Right. So, and again, you talked about humulene, which is not on this chart, but that's another one of the terpenes that's really been very popular and can help with a lot of different conditions. One of the ones I like is Eucalyptol. I know it's something people haven't heard much about, but I tend to look at it because why is that? Helps decrease the blood pressure, helps with sinus. It also helps with, believe it or not, it helps with weight loss, which is very interesting. So, and again, when you go into a dispensary and you ask for different products, they can actually, this is why I couldn't figure out why initially when I was working with these dispensaries, I would describe my condition and they'd turn around and say, here's the product you should have. Well, what are they looking at? They're looking at the cannabinoid profile and the terpene profile to address my particular situation and be able to help me with my give me the relief I'm looking for from a cannabis product. It's out there. So let me be more specific. Let's talk about the cultivars, Chris, that are there to help you with pain and terpenes. And I've got a little bit of a little title problem, which I'll fix up in just a second. But what's interesting is what are the best cultivars and terpenes for pain management? And this is where you get into products like ACDC, which is very CBD dominant, but helps quite a bit. And why would it help with pain? Because what it does is it goes in and it also helps, the CBD helps relieve the inflammation, which again helps reduce the pain. You want to talk about a few of these, Chris?
I'd actually talked about Harlequin a little bit earlier, dropped it in the chat. Again, trying to find the right balance for yourself whether it's a 1-to-1 ratio, 1-to-2, is really important when you're managing for pain management. Marc, it looks like we dropped out of presenter mode. I just wanted to have you go back into there.
Let me get fixed up. Let me get this fixed up right here. I just want to get those fixed up right there.
There you go. Okay, excellent. All right. Yeah, let's go to the next slide.
Okay. And so again, these are the cultivars to take a look at. So what are these cultivars? You can walk into a dispensary, for example, like Move, and you can say, do you have something, for example, that addresses like a lot of the Kush products? The Kush products are known to be able to hide, they're THC dominant, but they also, whether it's Grandmaster, whether it's Purple Master Kush, whatever, they help a lot with pain management. And this is something where, based on a terpene profile, can be very effective for you. It's out here. So I wanted to provide this for folks. I know you get questions on which cultivar should we look at. These are the ones that you should take a look at. And one of the most popular, interesting, Jeff couldn't make the webinar today, but he was telling me the most popular product that they sell in Move is ACDC, which is very interesting. It's here. So let's talk a little bit about your friend Delta 8 for a second, Chris.
Well, Delta 8 is a cannabinoid, offshoot of THC that exists naturally in the plant. What you're seeing is recently in 2018, the United States Congress in their Farm Bill reclassified anything that had less than 0.3% THC by weight as a hemp product rather than a illegal marijuana product. And so what you're finding is they're utilizing and extracting, through some synthetic processes, different types of THC, Delta 8, Delta 10, rather than the traditional Delta 9 THC that you find in our available medical marijuana products. And it's really all to do with prohibition. For some folks, we've seen it here tonight. Some folks say that getting access to legal medical marijuana it's overpriced. They're out of the market. So for some folks, they may try to utilize hemp-derived Delta 8 THC products, which are available over the counter at various CBD dispensaries and head shops and smoke shops. Now, the key part about all of this is understanding that getting it from a reputable source, who they themselves are also getting it from a reputable source that has done lab testing on it. You should not buy Delta 8 THC products at your local gas station.
Yeah, no, that's the real key. We have a slide on that, 2 slides from now, we talk about that. But I think the main part right now is really there is a difference between them, very slight difference. But if you keep it under 0.3 THC, meaning you don't have as much concentration that's in there, it does give you the pain relief that you're looking at. It isn't as psychoactive. You can see it's about 50% as psychoactive as Delta 9, but it is legal. I did an interview with Holly Bell, who's the head of the hemp project here in Florida. In fact, we had a video of her last week. We talked about Delta 8, and she talked about it herself. And her position is, it is what it is. The laws came into place. Hemp Delta 8 is legal. There's a lot of people that are trying to stop Delta 8 from being legal, but in essence, the federal government and even the state government put the legislation in place of 0.3% THC or less. And so it's out there. And what's interesting, she had an interesting point. They're not going to be able to stop Delta 8 from being sold in places like Texas, where they've tried to go in and pull it off the shelves and say it was an illegal product. Those vendors that it was pulled off the shelf came back to Texas, sued them, and won huge lawsuits against the state because they were legal. And she's saying, we're not going to do that here in Florida, because you're not going to get anywhere. It is what it is, and it does help with pain. Now, is it as effective as using a Delta 9 product? The answer is no. And also, a lot of the Delta 8 products here in Florida can be used in different combinations, like 1-to-1-to-1. I use a 1-to-1-to-1 product, 1 CBD, 1 THC, and 1 Delta 9, or excuse me, Delta 8, excuse me. It helps very well with pain relief. In fact, it's the best pain relief product that I've ever seen. But the answer is, yeah, they're there and they do work. And Delta 8 has a lot of medical benefits, not just helps you with pain, sleep, hangovers. It helps stimulate your brain, helps you with appetite, helps you with sleep, a number of things that are out there. So it has a lot of medical benefits. They're demonizing Delta 8 just like they're demonizing demonizing cannabis. And I think that's something we got to really pay attention to. Now, the real thing that we need to pay attention to is, as Chris mentioned, buy from a reputable vendor. I did a Delta 8 webinar last quarter. And prior to doing that, I went out to 5 local shops, CBD shops in my local area. I found out that only 2 of them had what they call COAs, certificates of authenticity, that actually showed me what's in the package was in fact being tested. And I was able to look at and make sure that what I got and what was in the package matched, and it was legal. 3 times I ran into products, and this is where the bad actors come into place, where they take a test they did last year on a batch that's not being in the bottle, and they're putting it out as a COA. And how can you tell? Because you can tell by the dates, and you can tell by the different terpenes and things that are in there, whether you in fact have a legitimate COA. And if you have any questions about it, ask your medical marijuana doctor or ask a cannabis practitioner to take a look at the COAs that are out there. Don't buy a Delta 8 product unless you see a COA that is less than a month old on it. If you see a date on that COA that's more than a month old, buyer beware. It may not be what you're really buying, what's in the bottle. Is that a fair assessment, Chris?
Yeah, and the same goes, the Department of Agriculture here in the state of Florida through Commissioner Nikki Freed have licensed over 7,000 hemp businesses throughout the state. So making sure that they also have their state license from the Department of Agriculture to even be selling these products is always a good first step. And then beyond that, the product asking, like you said, for the certificate of authenticity so you can see that it's been sourced and tested. The testing is so important because you as a sick patient don't want to put anything in your body that could have certain pesticides, fungus, bacteria, or heavy metals, and other things that a lot of these third-party laboratory tests are able to look at. So not just when you go into a hemp store, but even when you go into a medical marijuana treatment center, ask to see the testing so you can have that peace of mind of the products that you're utilizing and putting in your body.
Of the 3 products that I looked at that I found did not have legitimate COAs, 2 of the 3 had no date on the COA, which was a huge red flag that's out there. Obviously, what was that COA and this bottle didn't necessarily match. And again, you have a lot of people that want to take advantage of it. Just be careful. It is something that is legal. It is something that by reputable vendors that are there. I like to get mine from a medical marijuana dispensary here in Florida because I know it's been tested at least 3 times. Now, we have a CBD store that I put together called My Botanical Wellness. The reason we do that is because a lot of people ask me, where can I get a CBD product that is doctor recommended and has in fact been tested? And that's what our store is all about. It's mybotanicalwellness.com. We'll send that as a follow-up that's out there. And we're going to be starting to carry Delta 8 products in the next 2 weeks. And we went through a very rigorous investigation to make sure we did have a Delta 8 product that was in fact tested. And what's in the package has a COA that is literally been tested with that particular product. And that's really, really key that's out there. There's not a lot of people that are that conscientious about the health and safety of the customers that are out there. Now, this also falls into something called Delta 10. So Delta 8, great for helping with pain. It helps you with sleep. What does Delta 10 do? Delta 10 is, again, 0.3% THC or less, but it also is psychotropic. It goes the opposite direction. So that's what Delta 10 is all about. It's becoming a lot more popular. Again, be careful of bad actors in that area. A lot of people want to not spend the money on a medical marijuana card. They want to be able to get a product that's basically cost effective, but don't do it unless you have a COA that really, don't put something in your body that could be dangerous. That's all we're saying. And I'm really skeptical of a lot. Again, I've gone and looked at some of the Delta 10 products. I have not found one yet that has a COA that I think is legitimate. That's just my experience. Now, that doesn't mean they're not out there. It doesn't mean they don't exist. I haven't just found it yet. Chris, your comments?
No, like you said, again, as a consumer, you got to do your own research and you got to know who you're buying from. Again, I do not recommend buying it from a gas station. And again, asking for their license from the Department of Agriculture. And then beyond that, asking for the certificate of authenticity for the product. And as Marc said, making sure that it's not out of date.
Sure. Now, let's take a look at something else. What are the routes of administration? How do I take it? Now, this is something that goes back to the dosing. A lot of folks have questions about dosing. I tried this, I tried that. This is where you have different forms of, what's interesting is you have your tinctures, you have your vape pens, your capsules, your edibles, your topicals, metered dose inhalers, sprays, flour. There's something called onset time. That's the time to work. That's what you see up here. And so when you take a sublingual drop, for example, it could take anywhere between 15 to 40 minutes to work. That's over here. Now it will last for 4 to 6 hours. That's what's really interesting. And so, for example, in the morning, I'll take to address my pain issue, I take a tincture drop. But I know it's going to take approximately 20 minutes to work. So what I do is I also grab a vape pen, take a couple hits off of a vape pen, because that goes into my lungs directly, and it works almost immediately. And from there, I get between 2 to 4 hours of immediate relief. Chris, you've seen that, haven't you?
Yeah. So Mark, let's take a second and pause. And I think we can answer a lot of these questions that are in the chat and the Q&A based off just leaving this chart up right now.
Sure.
So let's start with Kathy's question that we have here. She's a new user, about 3 weeks now with gummies and a tincture, and she doesn't know how to find out what's going to help, number one, with the chronic pain. And that's why they're on this journey, and there's really nothing that they found that's any different. So they don't know how to juggle the product you want. Well, Kathy, as you can see here, gummies would fall under edibles, and then you have tinctures, but then all these other different methods of ingestion you can use, whether it's a patch, a spray, whether it's smoking flower, or as you see at the bottom here, smoking a concentrate or crumble shatter. And so, I would recommend that if you're not getting the relief utilizing the existing methods of ingestion, switch up your method of ingestion. As Mark said, the time to work for shatter is almost immediately. And I can tell you that if you do vape or you smoke some type of concentrate, you will feel those effects much quicker than waiting an hour for an edible to kick in.
Yeah, and a lot of folks will say, well, I took a capsule and it doesn't work. Or an edible. There's kind of a inside joke in the industry. Just about the time you think that edible doesn't work and you take more of it is the time it starts working. Okay. Edibles can take sometimes an hour to an hour and a half to work. That's why be careful and be cool when you're using edibles, because what it does, it goes into your stomach. Your stomach lining has to be able to absorb it. It then goes into your liver, which converts it from delta 9 to delta 11. So there's a process in your body, which is a stronger version of THC. And then as it distributes it throughout your body, it does a very good job of being able to help, for example, with sleep, with pain and that type of thing. But for example, a lot of patients that I work with who have trouble sleeping, I recommend if you're going to take an edible or a chocolate or something like that, do it an hour or two before you go to bed. Because by the time you go to bed, it's going to kick in, it's going to give you the relief you want, and it's going to be there. Don't take an edible and 15 minutes later, if it's not working, take another one. And then 15 minutes later, when it's not working, take another one. Because what's going to happen is after about an hour, all three of them are going to kick in, and then you will have a psychotropic effect that's out there, which you may or may not want.
Mark, I'll share with you a small anecdote. One time I was in Colorado on vacation with my wife, and we were on our way to a restaurant. She was hungry, and I had just stopped at the dispensary and picked up these cookies. Each cookie had 10 milligrams of THC in it. And she eats one and doesn't feel anything. We're on the road. She eats another a few minutes later. By the time we got to the restaurant, which is about a 30-minute drive, she'd already ate 4 cookies. Well, by the time we leave dinner and everything kicks in, I couldn't peel her off the bed for 16 hours.
Yeah.
But for some people, they may feel alarmed. Oh my God, I slept for 16 hours. But understanding that rest is part of the healing process. And for some folks right now who are looking for relief from chronic pain, if you're working and you have a job, it's going to be difficult because some of these treatment regimens are going to require you to sleep for 10, 12, 16 hours in order to heal your body. Your body's been damaged so much that you do need that time to rest. So understanding that if you're living an active lifestyle where you're still working a 9 to 5 or you're still working during the week, then taking these heavier doses may be something that you reserve for the weekend. But one method of ingestion,
or like I did with my mother, we had her take it at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. And one method of ingestion
she was asleep by midnight
that helps is the
baby,
patch.
and it really helped her rest.
Yeah. I want to take the time to answer some more of these questions here. Roseanne, Richard Dickens, and even an anonymous attendee all said they have small fiber neuropathy, non-diabetic pain. What should they utilize? Okay. And so I do want to answer these live. Even Richard said he doesn't smoke. Well, one thing in particular that can help is the transdermal patch for that long-term relief. But
Right.
if you need something immediately, sublingual drops can help to give you some potency. But all in all, utilizing RSO in a strong cannabis concentrate can give you that immediate relief. But smoking itself always has been, and like you said, they have those meter dosed inhalers now, and some of those nasal sprays are alternatives to smoking through your lungs. So you got to really consult your local medical marijuana treatment center and your doctor to find out what's best for you. But we're going to talk a little bit later in dosing as well in the future slides. But keeping a patient journal is the number one way that you're going to be able to find out and figure out what works best for you. Each day you should write down what you're utilizing, when you utilized it, what were the effects, until you find the sweet spot, as Marc had termed it.
Right. And what's fascinating is it'll tell you not only what time of day, but did you eat or not eat with it? Because cannabis loves fats. They love to have you eat. They typically love to have you eat while you're taking cannabis. It has a better effect on your body than taking it just by itself. So it's something you really need to take a look at that's really out there. And again, capsules like edibles can take 30 minutes to 2 hours to work. So be very, very careful. I know that, Chris, we can go through, I have lots of stories about the edibles, but they work. Just give them time, have some patience that it's out there. If you need immediate relief, this is where you have the vape pens. This is where you have the transdermal patches. And this is where you have, for example, the topicals that are there. Topicals were great, especially topicals that are transdermal. Move, who's one of our sponsors for tonight, has a great transdermal patch. I have one on now. I have a CBD patch that I keep. So really all I need to do is, since I have the CBD in my body, reducing the inflammation, which is important, I just need to worry about how much THC I'm using to be able to regulate the pain that's out there. So it's a really good way of being able to control your dosing and finding that sweet spot that we talked about earlier.
Oh yeah, Marc, I went on a cruise over the summer one year, and you can't really bring marijuana on a cruise ship, but that transdermal patch was something that helped me get through all the walking that we had to do, all the tourist activities, especially on a huge cruise ship, as big as they are. So definitely recommend that if you can get access to a transdermal patch, utilize it, especially if you're someone who suffers from chronic pain.
Right. You want to address a few more questions, Chris, while we're here?
Sure. I'll go down here.
I want to address Roseanne's question about RSO, getting her nauseous, dizzy, wobbly, and really not helping with neuropathic pain. Roseanne, you've got to be careful with RSO because it is strong. Okay. And this is where go low and go slow really comes into place. It is high, it can be high. In fact, it's sometimes very high in THC. That's what makes it so potent to be able to help you. But go low and go slow. Now, how come it's not helping you? Because probably the THC is helping you address the pain, but you have, especially with neuropathic pain, you have to be very careful because that has to be matched with CBD to reduce the inflammation. Perfect example of where reducing the inflammation helps you with reducing the pain. And a higher concentration of CBD with your RSO will be able to help you quite a bit. In other words, maybe one drop of, or one, let's say 25 milliliters of RSO with maybe 50 milliliters of CBD could be able to be something that's very effective for you. Neuropathic pain really gets addressed by the inflammation part of CBD, but it has to be used with THC. Something that's there. Chris, you've seen that, haven't you?
Yeah, again, we talked about it earlier. It really is fine. People are asking, how do you know what type to use? How do you know how much to take? And again, I said earlier, having your own patient journal is important so you can see what works for you. You can see what cultivars you've been utilizing, because you're eventually going to have to find that right, combination of THC to CBD and even certain terpenes in the plant to really find the relief you want. And it's hit or miss. Even your medical marijuana doctor that might recommend to you, it's not like they were taught from scratch in medical school and there's been 40 years of training. Our doctors themselves are in many ways are on this journey with you of trying to find what works best for you. And so they might know these various things here, and they'll know the different combinations, but for you and your own body, your own physiology, it really is a trial and error type of thing. And so we're going to talk a little bit about titration here coming up in some slides. So Marc, let's go ahead and move on from these. And I hope we'll get to addressing the rest of the questions tonight before we wrap up.
Let's talk a little bit about, take dosing on head on. Again, I'm going to go back to that, it just depends on your body and how your body reacts to it. in the case of my wife, high concentrations of CBD with lower concentrations of THC work very effective for her. In my particular case, I need a higher concentration of THC, but I still need the CBD, no question about it, to be able to address my particular sweet spot. What I'm really saying is listen to your body. No doctor is going to tell you what's going to be good for you. There's no advice that I can give you tonight that's going to say, take this and it's going to work. This isn't take 2 pills and see you in the morning. As you go low and go slow, what does that mean? Start with a 1-to-1 ratio. Take 25 milliliters. Try that for a day or two. If that doesn't work, kick that up to 50 milliliters. See how that works. If that doesn't work, kick it up to 75 milliliters. At some point in time, you're going to begin to feel the THC take effect. And when that happens, you can use pure CBD or CBD, full spectrum CBD, to come down off that high. That if you start getting high and you say, yeah, I'm starting to feel a little like a little out of control, then take some more just pure CBD. And it'll bring you back down within 20 minutes, bring you back to where you really want to be. And that's what the go low and go slow is. And once you understand where your tolerance is for THC, you can then adjust, with THC, you can then adjust your CBD for the condition of your body and how your body works. And there's a lot of questions, I know, whether it's fibromyalgia, whether it's neuropathic pain, which are pretty much the same thing. What you're really trying to do is figure out for your body what works. And again, listen to your body. Your body will let you know when it's working. It'll also let you know when it's not working. That's safe to say, Chris?
Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to touch on is a question here. Russell has, he uses medical marijuana for chronic back pain, for some fusions he had in his spine, but also for Parkinson's. And he's utilizing the topical in the capsules that Move has in a 1-to-1 ratio, and also using some tinctures. And he wants to know if it's adequate for Parkinson's. Well, one of the things interesting is that the federal government has studied utilizing cannabinoids for Parkinson's, for dementia, and for other, ischemic effects. And I just dropped a patent here that the government has had on this since 2003. So, in the grand scheme of things, you got to utilize what works best for you. But one of the most famous Parkinson patients out there is Michael J. Fox. And he talks about how he's utilized CBD oils and also finding that right sweet spot for him among things. So again, there's no straight answer that we can give you as to this is exactly what you can use. It really is going to depend on you trying it out, tried and true for your body. If you need to go up more on your doses, by all means. But again, as Marc said, start low and slow and then work your way up.
I will mention that you have to be with things, certain lifestyle medical issues or conditions really require a little more patience. It's been talked about when you look at a lot of these studies, it really takes about a month to 6 weeks, sometimes as much as 3 months before the Parkinson patient begins to see the relief they want from using cannabis. And that's because the body has been damaged to the point that it takes a while for your body to come in and repair a lot of that and to really overcome a lot of the negative effects that are out there. It does work. I worked with a patient about 4 years ago with Parkinson's. It took him about 2.5 months. Now it's helped him. Now it doesn't get rid of it. It does. It's not a cure, but it gives him the capability to lead a semi-normal life by being able to use it. His tremors are reduced. In fact, in his case, it's almost gone away, and he's able to lead like I say, a semi-normal life for his particular condition. He feels he got his life back. And again, this is patience. Cannabis falls in that category. Parkinson falls in that category. Fibromyalgia falls in this category. You've got to be able to give your body the relief it needs for a period of time to help it heal. Have you seen that, Chris?
Yeah, and some other questions I want to take the time to answer. Debbie Waddle says, is it true the healthiest way to take cannabis is by vaping the dry flower so that one gets the whole full spectrum of the plant and the entourage effect? And the truth is that you can still get the entourage effect from other methods of ingestion, not just by vaping. If you're looking for something that's healthy, as I said before, avoiding smoking is something that a lot of patients want to do, especially like a patient with lung cancer, late stage lung cancer. I have a member of my organization. The way they were able to beat their late stage lung cancer was by actually juicing the entire plant raw. So that is actually probably one of the healthiest ways as a method of ingestion to avoid, especially, as you said before, some folks who may have asthma or other lung conditions can't vape or combust and smoke.
Yeah, I know that one of the things that we talked about temperatures. What's interesting is as you heat up CBDA and THCA, it gets converted into THC and CBD. So when the plant is first, when a cannabis plant is first made, it's CBG. It then morphs into CBGA and THCA, and then based on time, based on temperature, it then produces CBD and THC. But if you can take flower, like I take, like for example, if you get it from Move, I drop it in a magic butter machine, and it's a machine where I put CBT oil in there with the flour, and I cook it for literally 8 hours at 160 degrees. Now, what's interesting is it extracts the THCA and CBDA from the cannabis. THCA is great for pain. CBDA is great for inflammation, but it never triggers the THC and CBD, meaning I don't get high by using it. So in essence, I'm making my own tincture drops for pain that I can use to be able to address, again, the pain and the inflammation without having necessarily get high. And I found it to be very, very effective.
Well, Marc, another question from Deborah Watto that came in is, do you have a brick and mortar storefront in Florida? So I'm going to drop a link here in the chat for folks. This is a link to the Office of Medical Marijuana Use here in the state of Florida, and it lists all of the medical marijuana treatment centers that are licensed in this state. And they have a neat little tool on the website where you can search for an MMTC dispensary near you, and you can actually search by zip code or county, and you can see all the brick and mortar storefronts. In addition, some of these medical marijuana treatment centers may not have a brick and mortar storefront, but they do offer home delivery. So you have that option as well to get it from the convenience of your own home. Sure.
And in the My Botanical Wellness site, which is an online site, we work with the MMTC medical marijuana treatment clinics. And so when you go into a medical marijuana treatment clinic, you can buy your product there. And in many cases, if they don't have it in stock, we'll ship it to you online. But it's a combination of what we call click and mortar. This is where you can actually see people to be able to take a look at it and be able to answer a lot of that. And it's going to be it's very, very effective to be able to get people, again, a lot of answers. The biggest problem that people have is, what products do I use? What's good for my particular condition? And that's what we're trying to address with a lot of these seminars, and a couple tools we'll be coming out with over the next couple of months. So, Chris, you want to take another question?
Yeah, one question here from anonymous attendee. How much does it cost to get cannabis to put in a vape that helps with sleep and chronic pain? Well, that varies from MMTC to MMTC. Some have different vape pens that have different cultivars, different effects that they're trying to achieve. And so you really have to go and test out the various products and see which one works best for you. And also the different price points that they may have if cost is a concern. But in the grand scheme of things, I would say from a just personal experience, vaping itself isn't necessarily the way to get the most impact or bang for your buck, if you will, on what you're trying to do. If you need help with sleeping and chronic pain, some folks utilize edibles. Again, those take time to kick in. Other folks like to smoke concentrates. And for many of you here, with many of your questions I'm seeing, smoking concentrates is probably the quickest method of ingestion to help you. Another question here is, what method of intake would you recommend for an anxiety or panic attack? Well, if you're having a panic attack, you need immediate relief. Either smoking through flower or smoking a concentrate would give you the most immediate relief that you would need in regards to having a panic attack or anxiety attack.
But also if you're using, for immediate relief, you're right, the vaporizing, smoking makes some sense, but also, especially a vape pen, but also CBD will help quite a bit with that. Your tincture oil with CBD. And unfortunately, it'll take about 20 minutes to 40 minutes of work, depending on your body. But there are ways of being able to address that. And that's what CBD does. It counteracts the high, that anxiety that you get from using THC. We covered that earlier. Chris,
yeah. Well, one thing that just popped in the chat, what's the best way to take RSO? Well, through a measured dose. So if you're pushing it out through a syringe, being able to see if you're using a whole milliliter or half a milliliter is important, but taking it orally just with a drop under your tongue is probably the best way to get the relief that you're looking for. Now, if you can actually vape or smoke RSO as well. If you need immediate relief, especially if you're into smoking concentrates. But again, just taking it as an oral drop for me has often been the best way to ingest it.
Oral drops are great. There's a lot of tinctures out on the market. For example, Move has a great RSO oil that I like to use. They have a CBD dominant one and a sativa dominant one, which is great. Also, what I did with my mother, my mother is 88 years old. We started her on this regime. Again, she's 93 right now. the concept of a lot of these dosing routes of administration were foreign to her. We actually went to the store and bought capsules, and we took RSO oil and put them inside the capsules and told her at 10 o'clock at night, take the capsule. And that worked for her. She's comfortable with it. She doesn't want to change a lot of things. She understood how to take a capsule, but we needed to get it. And the tincture drops, she seemed to have trouble with it. I'm not going to get into that, but we found we put it in a capsule, said, Mom, take, we at first we were able to control the amount of RSO by how much we put in the actual capsule itself. So we controlled the dosing, being able to do that. But that's another form for senior citizens that have trouble just in general. I found that I like the tincture version of RSO. I think that works great. But again, capsules work great. And as Chris said, you can use it from a flower standpoint as well.
One question here was, why are these terpene flavors often found in the vapes? Instead, you get, artificial synthetic flavors like cotton candy and such. And the truth is that because many ways vape pens are distillates, and so you're only really just smoking a distillate of THC or CBD that have been, artificially recombined and not naturally occurring in the plant. So I would recommend that, on your vape pens, you should ask them, how it was processed, what are the contents, look to see some of those laboratory testing results, so you can see if those are natural terpenes that have been added back in synthetically, or if it's been extracted through the plant organically.
But vaping is one of the best ways of using cannabis. No question about it. You get the terpenes, the flavonoids, and you get the things. Good news, works right away. Yep. Bad news, works 2 to 4 hours. That's there. So you have to either do it constantly or use it in combination with, for example, tincture oils, or combinations with capsules or edibles, for example. Edibles are great. I mean, there's one comment here. I think Charlene had a question. She has pain at night and can't sleep. What I have found very effective for a number of patients that have trouble sleeping, and I have a number of patients in that category, is we have worked on edibles. We found some edibles, especially when they're 1-to-1, or especially when they get higher THC. And what they're able to do is they're able to take those, again, an hour or two before bed, and it helps them fall asleep. And more importantly, it helps them stay asleep all night. And that's what's really, really important. Chris, you go through what I call the male curse of having to wake up in the middle of the night. It's something I think that any male over the age of 55 has to address. You may not be that age, but I know that I am. And I found that what I found is that THC helps a lot with that. That's out there. It either cuts down the number of times or even me getting up in general. But I do find I have to go at least once a night. It's like I've not been able to get over that. But I have found I've been, rather than 4 or 5 times a night, it's been able to help quite a bit. But again, it may sound crazy. In my case, I have a piece of chocolate, little cube of chocolate, actually half a cube of chocolate, take it a little bit before bed and sleep like a baby, which helps quite a bit. And I found that helps a lot of people that are out there. And this might help you, Charlene, it might help you with that. And again, find yourself a medical cannabis doctor or a practitioner that can help you walk through that. They'll help you be able to find the right formula. Move, for example, has a great chocolate product. It's one of the ones I use. But what I like about it is they're all individually wrapped, and they all come in little cubes, which is easy to be able to use. That's out there. Yeah. Chris, you want to grab another question?
Sure. Happy to. One of the questions I'm looking at here is from Dr. Betty Diaz. She suffers from lupus, fibromyalgia, and a major complaint that she has is inflammation and pain. These hybrid strains seem to be really popular. Usually they're high in THC and low in CBD. Would this be a good choice? Well, again, try it out for yourself first. But ideally, having that 1-to-1 ratio of CBD to THC gives you the maximum medicinal benefit, and understanding that CBD does act as a strong anti-inflammatory, in many ways, much stronger than some of the over-the-counter stuff that folks have access to that they take on a regular basis throughout the day.
Dr. Diaz, you might want to take a look at ACDC. That's your 1-to-1. It's almost 1-to-1. It is a great cultivar. Again, if you're going to be addressing inflammation, you're going to be addressing fibromyalgia, lupus, for example, try to get as close to a 1-to-1 as you can in both the flower, the edibles, or whatever that's out there. And ACDC does a great job of that. You might want to take a look at it as that is a way to start, because the high concentrations of THC will block the pain, but it's not, the CBD will not get rid of the pain. And in fact, it won't. What you really need is you need to have a higher concentration of CBD. The other option is, if you are taking those high concentration of CBD, have some THC, have some CBD oil around with it, and take a drop or two of that to be able to help you with that. It's there. But again, I think the more you get to a 1-to-1, the better it's going to be for those particular conditions that are there. That's what they found through scientific studies. Let's put it that way.
And Catherine has a question, on how to find the best combo that she's not high and can't function. And this is what we're finding is that, find that right combination of 1-to-1 where the CBD is counteracting, some of the THC and you're not having such high amounts. I mean, some of the stuff in the dispensaries you can find will have like 25% THC, less than 1% CBD. That's a 25-to-1 ratio. That's not what you're looking for per se, if you're looking for long-term relief. And some of the other plants, might have a 2-to-1 ratio when it comes to CBD to THC, and that can help out as well. Again, carrying a patient journal, logging your side effects and trying to find out what's happening. Because also, you mentioned some side effects you've had in the past, like tingling or even itching, might not have anything to do per se with the plant itself in regards to your physiology, but that, maybe you got a batch that might have pesticides, mold, fungus. There's a number of other impurities that can exist in the plant that can cause side effects. So you definitely want to log what cultivars you're utilizing and what doses and what your side effects are, so you can figure out in the grand scheme of things what works best for you, and make sure you're in constant consultation with your doctor in regards to your treatment plan. And also this is where you come into play when you're talking about you want to be able to get as close to that. Again, going back to that 1-to-1 ratio, you want to pay attention more to the CBD products. A lot of people who buy edibles, they have a very cool edible. You see a candy bar, for example, or a chocolate bar, excuse me, or you get an edible. You look at the side of it, and it's all THC. Okay, there's not any CBD. A lot of the edibles don't have any THC in it. I've gone through, and this is where again the Wana products by Move, they have some great 1-to-1 edibles that are out there. Pay attention to what's in the box, and also pay attention to the COA. If you're getting stuck with a lot of THC products, it's not going to help with the pain if the pain is being driven by inflammation. So Marc, Wana is a great edibles brand. I can speak up for having used their California-based products. And so I would definitely, if Move has Wana edibles and gummies, I would definitely recommend folks go ahead and utilize them. One question Charlene has is, do I need a medical marijuana card to get edibles? Well, if you have a medical marijuana card, you have access to the edibles, which have Delta-9 THC in them that you can get from our medical marijuana treatment centers. Now, if you don't want to get a card, there are some places, some shops, some CBD dispensaries that have hemp-based derived Delta-8, Delta-10 edibles that you can get and utilize. Can you buy them online? Again, you have to do your research. I would recommend going into a brick and mortar store, checking, as we said before, for certificates and licenses before you make any online purchases.
And I'm going to throw a shameless plug. That's why the My Botanical Wellness site was created. We have doctors that have looked at these products. They're CBD-based products. We don't sell, we're not a medical marijuana dispensary. We're a online CBD store. And what we've gone through and looked at and made sure COAs match, and they're very high, for example, in CBD that's out there in 0.3% THC or less. So again, that might help you quite a bit that's out there, and they're online. So you can be able to order that. It's on there. Now we're not selling Delta-8 today, but in 2 weeks we'll be selling Delta-8. We are not going to be selling Delta-10, for example, because we haven't been able to find a quality product that fits in that category yet. That's out there.
Yeah, and one question Elaine had was she didn't understand what you meant when you said Delta-10 goes in the other direction. Well, we were talking about psychoactive effects, and you found that Delta-8 is less psychoactive than Delta-9. Delta-10 tends to be more psychoactive, right. And so that's what you were explaining earlier. Another question here for someone anonymously, they're using, for their neuropathy treatment, CBD, THC, but they're also using lion's mane. And so understanding that psilocybin and magic mushrooms are also a new component into homeopathic therapies and alternative treatments that are being researched in various states across the country. There's even a bill here in Florida to examine how folks can utilize psilocybin or what is better known as magic mushrooms for treatment of anxiety and depression. And so although it's not legal yet, here in the Washington, D.C. area where I'm currently located physically, it is decriminalized, and you can get access to that just like you can get access to high quality THC through the great market that they have. But again, until psilocybin and magic mushrooms become legal in Florida, you're not going to have legal access to those products.
Good. Now, there's a great question that Anonymous brought up, and I will let you tackle this one, Chris. says, how come I went to a Florida cannabis event in Mount Dora and a person was selling me THC and CBD products without a card? You want to address that one?
Yeah, many of the THC products that are being sold are either being sold two ways: from a someone who's a licensed hemp distributor that is selling a hemp product essentially that has Delta 8 THC or Delta 10 or some other type of THC extraction in it, and they'll sell you no problem without a medical marijuana card. Medical marijuana treatment centers, on the other hand, have to log your dosing, how much they're selling, and such. So there's a lot more paperwork involved in that, which is why you have to have a card, so that way they can look at the patient registry and what you're utilizing in regards to your treatment plan. And then, of course, there are your legacy or black market dealers that are asking for ID per se, but also there's no peace of mind because you don't know where they source those products. It's not like black market dealers are going to ask their Colombian drug dealer for a test results on heavy metals or pesticides.
Yeah, but here's the thing. You go to I was at the same Mount Dora conference, and they say I have THC, I have CBD. Again, if it's hemp-based THC, it's 0.3% or less. There's not a lot of THC in that product. Best way of putting it. Okay, and so the CBD effect that helps you with pain is really coming from reducing the inflammation. If you're trying to use hemp-based products for pain, it's not going to necessarily help you if the problem is not inflammation-based. Let's put it that way. Okay, this is where you need to cross that line across the 0.3 THC, go to the medical marijuana dispensaries that are higher in THC to be able to adjust that particular product. So where they are on one side saying I got THC, leaving you the illusion that there's enough THC in it to help you with their pain, the answer is all THC is not THC is not THC. It has to do with the amount of dosing, the amount of grams, and again, hemp-based THC is 0.3%. I know a lot of people come to me and said, well, I use CBD and it helps with my pain. And the answer is sure, the condition normally has to do with inflammation. But in my particular case, I can't use CBD oil. It just will not get rid of the pain. Those little discs in my neck, tap me on the shoulder and say, buddy, we need to get something that really does the blocking. And unless I drink the whole damn bottle, it's not going to help me very much with it. Chris, you want to address that?
Well, actually, Marc, I was hoping we go on to the next slide. I don't want to keep folks here all night, so let's go to the next one.
The next one here. Okay. Bottom line. What's interesting is the nice part about cannabis is that you're in control. On one side you have dosing and you're worried about what should I take and how do I take it. But as you go through that regime where you're starting to go low and you go slow, you control how much THC you're taking. You control how much CBD you're taking. Listen to your body. I know in working with this and as my wife, when we were working with her, she kept saying, what should I do here? What should I do there? And I said, how do you feel? Your body's telling you. I can't tell you what your body's telling you. You know what feels good. You know what makes you relax. You know what helps you with your pain. You know what helps you with your anxiety that's out there. So really, you're in control. And that's one of the main parts here. A lot of the pills that you're taking, you don't have control. And it has a lot of negative side effects. You aren't going to get addicted from cannabis. Now, people will tell me, Marc, you push a lot of cannabis. You take cannabis a lot. The answer is yeah. And I use cannabis for pain management. There's no question about it. I could not conduct my life on a daily basis without cannabis. Bottom line. But I couldn't put on seminars like this if I was high all the time. Well, I guess I could. The quality wouldn't be there, but it'd be kind of interesting to try. In about every 6 to 8 weeks, I take a day or two off. I stop taking it. Don't take it for a day or two. What that does is causes my body, who's producing endocannabinoids, sometimes my body gets a little lazy. And it says, I think since I'm getting it all coming from the outside, I'm going to kind of kick back and let the outside world cook there. When I stop doing that, it goes, hey, wait a minute. I better do something. I got to go back to work. And it causes your body to reset and your endocannabinoid system to recharge and really go back to work where it should and stop relying on the outside world. Now, I'm not addicted to cannabis. But after about a day to a day and a half, because of the severity of 7 herniated discs in my neck taps me on the shoulder and says, you better do something pretty quick because I'm the pain and I'm coming back. And I need you to address that inflammation. More importantly, I need you to address the pain that's coming there. So I'm not addicted to cannabis. I'm addicted to getting rid of my pain. And there's a big difference between it. I can stop anytime. I don't have any handshaking. That's out there. but it does something that I think there's a difference between the two that are there. Chris, you want to make some comments on these?
Well, Charlene just asked the question, does your body build up a resistance to gummies and then you have to increase the amount you take? It's not necessarily your body build up a resistance, it's your tolerance level that you're able to increase. And yes, you're going to probably actually over time have to increase the amount that you ingest in order to gain relief. And Mark, you just touched on the importance of what we like to call tolerance breaks,
Right.
where if you take a few days off of either smoking or ingesting, when you come back, you'll feel more of a medicinal effect for your body. Now, the truth is that some people's chronic pain is so horrible to live with that they need daily doses. And so
Right.
really, again, it does depend on your own body, your own treatment plan, and you have to be in consultation with your doctor. Again, keeping that patient journal, I can tell you, is probably the best way for you to really find your own sweet spot.
Right. And I have one of my patients that I work with has been smoking literally for 12 years and uses it for pain. And he kept saying, well, you know, what can I do to make it better? And I said, how about taking 4 days off? He looked at me and said, I'll be in so much pain. And I said, you know what? You take 4 days off and let's see what happens. And he did. And I went and saw him the next week and he said, damn, if that didn't really help, I'm smoking less of it. I'm getting more effects from it. I didn't have as much withdrawal as I thought. I was in some pain. After about the third day, I was thinking about going back to it. That's why it was 4 days and not 5. But because I usually recommend 5, but you clearly, again, I listen to my body. In my case, it's 2 days. I couldn't go 4 days, but I think that it's something that does work. And again, that holiday that you take, you use less product. You don't need as much. It goes back to the tolerance level that's out there. And so it costs less money, best way of putting it, to be able to do that. So it's something that really is there. And I think the other thing about cannabis that's important is the entourage effect. You know, using these CBD and THCs together help, but also many times I hear people say, I take it for X, I take it for cancer. And what's happened, my glaucoma went away. That's the case of my mother. My wife is the same way. She found a lot of aches and pains went away when she was taking it for anxiety. So I think it's something that we really need to take a look at. The entourage effect really is real.
Well, Mark, some questions here, a group of questions in the chat. You know, some people are utilizing certain medications that don't react well with CBD. So, you know, we talked about the importance of a 1-to-1 for medicinal value. But the truth is that if you consult your doctor and your doctor says that CBD will, interact negatively with other medications you may be taking, then utilizing those high THC content ones that you see available in your MMTCs may be the way for you. Again, you have to consult your doctor and make sure that you're abundantly open and clear with your cannabis use, but also all the other drugs that you may be taking for other underlying medical conditions until you can find the right strain that works in your lifestyle.
Right. It's really there. It will work. And again, it is a little bit of magic to figure out what your it's almost like your body and you are playing this game of a clue as to what's going to actually work for you. And when you start seeing it start to work, you know it works. When I got and found my sweet spot, my pain level went down to less than a 1. My physically, I felt better, no pain, and was clear-headed. I knew I found my sweet spot. Let's put it that way.
Well, Mark, do we have any more slides to go to?
No, I think we're done.
All right, well, then let's answer this last and final question from Kathy Laraquenta. Are you guys familiar with the upcoming change in controlling flower dispensation for medical marijuana treatment centers to the 35-day supply in flower form? And so, yes, I do. I am familiar with this. The OMMU recently rolled out new regulations that basically say you get a set supply, which, if I'm not mistaken, is 2.5 ounces over the course of 35 days.
Right.
What this means is that it's a rolling 35 days. Previously, what you could do is essentially on day 34, if you hadn't utilized your total allotment of 2.5, you could get 2.5 ounces. And then when it flips to day 35, you have a new 2.5 that you're allotted. And so you can go and get your 2.5. There's this big magical concern here in Florida among politicians and bureaucrats that people are getting too much cannabis and that could wind up on the black market. I can tell you that there's no danger of that. To me, this is a foolish regulation. This is bureaucracy getting in the way of medical treatment. If someone is in a chronic pain and have chronic debilitating conditions, they may need to utilize more than 2.5 ounces in 35 days. But This is the regulations that the OMMU is rolling out. And so understanding it's a 35-day rolling. So you within a rolling calendar period, you're only provided access to 2.5 ounces of flower. But again, that does not apply to concentrates. So and again, concentrates themselves can be utilized much more effectively and have a much stronger potency than the flower form itself.
Sure. And I think it's important to understand that it is something that we have been plagued in the cannabis industry by politicians not listening to science and more listening to lobbyists. And that's how we got into the situation. And that's pretty much what you see happening right now. Hence why people like NORML are asking you to get a hold of your local representatives and set them and say, look, I'm not being political. Look, it's not a matter of, black, white, pink, green, red, blue, whatever. That's not the issue. The issue is listen to the science, because if we could have listened to the science, literally thousands, if not millions of people would have got their life back and would have got a lot of relief. And that's all I'm looking for, is being able to help that. Now, I do want to point out, Move was the one who did some sponsorship tonight. They have almost all these products that we were talking about that are out there. There's some pictures of there. Please feel free to contact them and feel free to talk to them. These are the different locations that they're found in Florida. There's a couple of new locations that they also opened up. But one of the last things I want to point out, Chris, is they have a consultation service. You can call them up, whether you have a medical marijuana card or not, and you can say, I need consultation on what I should be using for my particular lifestyle medical condition. And it's free. Okay, you don't have to go to the store. They will do it in a online or a Zoom type of a format to do that. But take advantage of it. It's a free service that can help you be able to really understand more about how this applies to you in your particular situation that's out there.
Well, Mark, I'm glad that they're providing that service to patients. And again, there are numerous medical marijuana treatment centers across the state with varying products. So you as a patient should take the opportunity to sample the various ones, find the right price points for you, the right products that work for you, and take advantage of these various patient-oriented resources that are provided to you. Again, consulting with your doctor is the number one thing you can do in keeping that patient journal, to finding your sweet spot and finding the right doses, right cultivars, and right products that work for you and your condition. The last thing I just want to say again is, if you want to get involved, if you want to get these politicians and bureaucrats out of our health decisions and out of our treatments plans, please become a member of Suncoast NORML. You can visit www.suncoastnorml.org. Membership is only $25 a year. Also comes with various member benefits. And again, all of our funds go directly back into our advocacy and education efforts. I do not take a dime as executive director, nor do any of our board members and executive staff. Everyone is volunteers, and we do that because we want you, the patients, to be the forefront of what we're advocating for. And so again, Mark has some great resources for you on balanced living and a healthy lifestyle. So take advantage of these, and we look forward to seeing you at future medical marijuana wellness awareness webinars.
Right. So I think we've been going at this for about 2 hours, Chris. So I think it's probably time to wrap up. But first of all, I want to thank everybody who's still there. We still have over 60 people online, and thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope it's been well worth your time and energy. My goal as a cannabis practitioner is, if I can help one person each day get their life back, I feel that I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish. That's my personal goal. Last year, I was able to accomplish it, and I was able to actually identify people on a daily basis that by the set webinars, or by talking to them or by emails, that they actually said to me, I got my life back. But that wasn't words I put in their mouth. That was words that they actually came back and hinted in those particular areas. But that's really what this program is really all about, is to help people get their life back. And I want to thank you very much for hanging me in there. Next week, our webinar is going to be on arthritis. So if that's one of the conditions that you need to address, we'll be tackling that particular condition next week. Please join us. Go to marijuanaaware.com and please sign up for that. And I do want to point out, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to have our first seminar, meaning in person, in the Villages, March 2nd. Go to marijuanaaware.com and you'll be able to sign up. There'll be 2 sessions, one in the morning at 9:30, one in the afternoon at 1:30. The subject is going to be pain management, anxiety and stress, and medical marijuana. And we'll be actually doing 2 different sessions. Because it's a physical seminar, we are limited to 70 people in the room. It's going to be held at the Waterfront Inn. So feel free to sign up for the morning and afternoon sessions. And again, I want to thank you very much for your time and your energy. Chris, I want to thank you for contributing. I know he's been very helpful in helping us out there and kicking in at the last minute. And And Jeff, I'm sorry, I hope you get well soon. And to each and every one of you out there, please stay safe. And Chris, thank you very much for what you've done. I owe you one, man. That's for sure. But
Have a great evening, everyone.
Yeah, everybody, please stay safe. And hopefully we'll see you next week for the arthritis webinar. Thank you very much and have a good evening.